The Palm Beach Civic Association brings you Studio 33480, delving into key issues impacting all who live or work in the zip code for the unique island of Palm Beach. This program is sponsored by the Fortin Foundation of Florida. And now, our host.
I'm Tim Malloy. Welcome to Studio 33480. Our guest today is Brad Robinson. He's a senior partner in the Millennium Group, which is a boutique private investigative agency based in West Palm Beach, but has global reach, actually, because they handle an awful lot of things. Brad, thanks for coming. Let's start out with this. You have a fascinating background. You have an agency here that does big stuff, but you started out as a young guy and ended up as a CIA officer. We don't call them agent, though some people do. Trace your history for us. Back to California as a young guy, graduate student? Is that what it was?
Grad student. That's when they first approached me, is in grad school.
All right.
In California. I was a political science major, international relations. Mm-hmm. My minor was German, so they liked that stuff.
How did that work? It did take a long time? Did you make a decision immediately?
A year.
Is a year. So you were interviewed and re-interviewed?
Not for me to decide, for them to decide.
So they come to the campus and talk to you or to your place?
Yeah. I think one of my professors put them on to me. I later found out that's pretty standard. They have spotters.
Was this something you had thought about? Law enforcement or anything
Never
like that?
once. Nothing close.
What did you want to do?
I want to be a movie star.
Well, they make movies about guys like you. Let's flash forward a year or so. Where did you end up and tell people what your job was?
So a year to get through the hiring process. Another year in training after that. And from that point, they sent me to Western Europe, stationed me at what ended up being 3 different U.S. embassies in 3 European countries.
And your job, your mandate was what?
Well, I was undercover as a State Department Foreign Service officer, a diplomat.
Like a diplomat, yeah.
But my real job was to recruit spies to deliver information of interest to U.S. policymakers.
Where did you meet them? How did this work? Parties?
Parties,
yes.
Yeah. Diplomatic receptions,
yeah.
Events. On the 4th of July, every U.S. embassy holds a big 4th of July party, and all the diplomats are invited. Similarly, every other embassy has their Independence Day or something similar. They invite, and there are other smaller events, but I mean that's an example of what a diplomatic reception would look like.
So you'd be a dressed-up, good-looking young guy, and you'd, in German sometimes or in English, you would sidle up to somebody, and did they not know they were being played, or did?
Maybe sometimes.
Was everybody playing everybody else?
There's a lot of that. Yeah.
There is.
Sometimes you're not sure whether you're doing the recruiting or being recruited.
Tell me, where were you posted? What cities?
Berlin, Stockholm, and Vienna.
So they'd move you around from place to place because you don't want to be identified from one to the other? Is that the way it works?
That's part of it, is that your cover erodes over time.
So you get somebody you think is an important find or get or whatever. How does that work? Do you get back on the phone and say, hey, I got a guy or a woman?
Yeah, typically after an event or after anywhere. I mean, I met one of my best agents, one of my best recruitments, standing in line at a bakery. So, I mean, it can happen anywhere. But yes, after I've met them, they call that spotting. After I've met them, we've exchanged business cards maybe. I'll trace him, have him send word back to Langley. They'll trace him to make sure, see if what they've got on him, if anything. A lot of times they don't have anything.
Did you, I mean, this isn't being flippant, but do you say, like, how's the Danish today? Or did you know who this was going in? Or did you follow this person?
That guy, no, that was completely happenstance. It was a Sunday afternoon. I walked down the street from my apartment, hung over to get some pastries. And I saw him pull up in front while I was standing in line. I was busy as Sunday morning. Saw him pull up in front, and I noticed a diplomatic license plate.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So he got in line behind me, and I struck up a conversation.
In English?
In German.
In German.
We introduced each other, and I pretended like I was surprised that he was also a diplomat, although he was a real diplomat. And it turned out to be fortunate that it was a long line, because I got a good 10 minutes to chat him up. In that 10 minutes, he sort of revealed that he was a low-level diplomat at his embassy, and that the ambassador sort of used him as a gopher.
Got it.
Even though he's a bona fide diplomat.
Wasn't happy. You could sense that.
He'd been sent out to get the cake for the ambassador's birthday party that night. And the ambassador had him working late the night before doing some grunt work. And he was clearly upset at the way he was being treated. Well, in CIA parlance, that's considered a vulnerability. He's not a happy guy.
Yeah.
And so I took note of that and put that in my table back to headquarters. And I said, I'd like to go after this guy. And they said, yeah, great. And two months later, I'd recruited him and as an internal source.
I'm betting you can't tell me what country he was representing. Right. Okay, thought so. Or you'd have to slap me. So that's a good example. But you were a good athlete. You are a good athlete. You played tennis with people. I mean, you also just kind of ingratiated yourself in any way you
Tennis,
could.
golf, a lot of squash. Very popular. I'd played racquetball in college. I mean, as a hobby. But when I got to Europe, found out there's no such thing as racquetball. It's squash. So I learned squash, which is very, very similar, because there were a lot of our potential targets were interested in squash. One story is kind of funny is I met an Albanian, which are very tough targets. It's kind of a hermit kingdom, at least especially back in the late 80s. And they were of interest, mostly because we didn't have very many sources in Albania. And I met an Albanian at a reception and gave my usual spiel, what do you like to do in your free time? Because whatever he was going to say, I was going to say, you too? Crocheting? And he said, I like to play badminton. I said, oh, but I'm looking for someone to play with.
Right.
We made an appointment, right then, I made an appointment to, because I knew the headquarters was going to love this guy. We made an appointment to play on Monday. This was Friday. I went out over the weekend and got badminton lessons because I wasn't even sure what part of the
rackets guy, but yeah.
But I had to, by Monday I had to look like I was not an expert, but an experienced badminton player when I'd only first started 48 hours earlier. So I managed to pull that off, and that worked out kind of cool because he was looking for a badminton partner and I was looking to recruit an Albanian. So.
And you got him?
No.
You didn't get him.
They don't all have happy endings.
We have pictures of you on a mountaintop with someone. We don't need to know who.
Skiing at government expense.
Got pictures of you in the weight room, and there's a serious angle to that question in that picture. You had to be fit to do this. This is not an easy gig, and it's dangerous. Can be. To the extent that you can, tell me about that.
The danger angle.
Yeah.
Not the fitness angle.
Well, either way. Yeah, I mean,
I keep in mind the Cold War was still ongoing at the time. And the places that I was working, particularly Berlin and Vienna, were known as spy hotbeds. Mm-hmm. They even called Berlin Spy City. And this is back when they were still East and West Berlin. So the competition between us and the other side was pretty intense. The counter surveillance that we had to go up against in a place like what was then West Berlin, was significant. The East Germans were trying to catch us. When I say catch us in the act of spying, doing some act that would clearly show that I was not a diplomat, that I was acting in a way that was not the way an actual State Department officer would act, but is the way a CIA officer would act. And then they would pick you up and interrogate you. And
could there be terrible consequences?
Could be. To be honest, and I hate to sound not self-centered, but I think for me and most of my colleagues, what you worry about the most in that scenario is exposing your source. Mm-hmm. If I've recruited you, part of that recruitment process is probably involved me promising you that you're going to be okay.
Yeah,
we can pull this off. You do it the way I tell you, follow my instructions to the letter, and everything will be fine. Well, if you end up getting wrapped up, if we, for example, together during a clandestine meeting, door gets smashed open, they come running in, now we're both in handcuffs, separated. The consequences for you might be worse than the consequences. I might just have a couple of rough nights, but for you may never be seen again.
Yeah.
And that's going to be on my shoulders because I'm the one that told you it would work out.
So there's a level of potential guilt in all of this. I mean, everybody's a human being in this thing.
Even short of that dire scenario, some sources just don't take to it that well. The guilt can wear on them. And if they don't have the right personality, the guilt can wear on them. After all, they're betraying their country. They become traitors for money, usually. Maybe that gets to them. Maybe the pressure gets them. They're under a lot of pressure now. Fear of getting caught. Maybe that breaks them down. So your source can have negative consequences.
Right.
Well short of being caught and executed. I mean, he could have a nervous breakdown. He could commit suicide.
And it's usually money that you are offering? Is it will get you out of the country too, or is it?
Yeah, that's rare. Sometimes, depending on the 90% of it is money. A lot of our agents, it's confusing because we call them agents. A lot of our agents do it for patriotism. And
right. They don't like the way the country's going.
Yeah, patriotism in the sense that, let's say they come from a communist country and they think that their country would be better off without the communists, then they might work to try to destabilize them. And that might be part of my pitch, depending on what I've decided is motivating you. What I think that they're most likely to be motivated by, that's going to be the center point of my pitch, and 9 out of 10 times it's money. If it's not money, it's usually the other thing. Well, the example I gave about the guy in the bakery.
Right. Yeah.
For him, it wasn't political. It was more, he felt that he was being undervalued.
And how much money would it take?
Somewhere between surprisingly little. I mean, if you think that a diplomat anywhere is making pretty decent money.
Yeah.
You could be, back then in the late 80s, early 90s, you could be a diplomat from a third world country making $1,000 a month, which back in Lima is pretty good living.
Yeah.
They get into the Foreign Service, for example, or into their country's espionage service, especially back then, because they want to get out. They want to live in a foreign country. Right. Life in Vienna, regardless of the money, is a whole lot better than it is in Beijing. They get into the diplomatic service, for example, for reasons other than trying to get rich. As a consequence, they get to Western Europe, for example, and they're struggling financially.
Yeah.
So if I say to them, I can pay you $2,000 a month to be my consultant, I just tripled his salary. So,
were you ever? And we're going to get to what you do now. But were you ever? Was anybody trying to? Were you ever the mark?
Yeah, I'm sure. Many times. I was never pitched. I never had someone say to me, "Brad, do you want to work for the KGB?" But I'm positive I was being sized up. They were, as I said, they were. There's that process after spotting and before recruitment called development. Mm-hmm. So I was developing people. Mm-hmm. Some of them were spies, also under diplomatic cover usually. Mm-hmm. So I was a fake U.S. diplomat. He was maybe a Russian or a Korean fake diplomat. I thought it was all about me recruiting him. He probably thought it was all about him recruiting me. So yeah, it goes both ways.
So you're 11 years in 3 different European capitals, and you decide, I'm getting out. And you picked Florida because what? Why?
My partner was from here.
Oh, okay.
And he said, let's open a PI agency in Florida.
2001. Let's talk about what you do. I've interviewed you before. It's pretty interesting. It's not so much cloak and dagger, but it can be intense, and it's certainly personal stuff. What's your number one caseload?
Infidelity investigations,
right,
which involve surveillance and some other things.
As much as you can, how does that work? Cameras everywhere, trailing people, tapping phone. How much can you do? Because you work really within the law, because I've interviewed you before and I know you have to, and you do.
A lot of it with infidelity, a big part of it, and sometimes the only component, is live surveillance. Mm. So if we can follow the suspected cheater and get videotape of him with the other person, that's pretty compelling evidence.
Right. You can repatriate kids if they're in. Talk to me a little about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like that's a bread and butter thing.
No, but you've done it.
It's actually what that involves for typically in all 3 of these cases, and it's not it's not that unusual. The case is unusual for us, but it's not unusual for someone in a marriage, nasty divorce, to grab the kid, and if that person, especially if that person is from a foreign country, they'll take the kid back home to El Salvador or wherever. 3 times we've been called in to track down that person and the child and get the child back. In each case, and we sort of insist on this, for the final stage of it, we need to bring our client there.
To see the...
Yeah, we don't want to physically be snatching up some kid off the street with him screaming and crying and thinking he's being kidnapped. We arrange it after we've done plenty of surveillance and reconnaissance and so forth, bring our client, the other parent, there. Now we know that this kid is alone typically for 10 or 15 minutes because the mom, let's say, is often late picking the child up from school. So the kid's standing there on the curb waiting to get picked up by mom. We have it timed out, so now we pull up. Dad leans out the window and says, "Son, it's me. Jump in." And the kid says, "Daddy," and they jump in, and we drive straight to the embassy.
Pirates. I know you haven't really done that personally, have you yet? Maybe you have. Yeah, pirates are a thing, right?
They're a big thing, yeah. Again, I don't make it sound like we're battling pirates every other week. 10 years ago, a client that we'd done some other stuff for called and said, "My friend has a boat, a yacht. It's in the Mediterranean now. They want to drive it to Abu Dhabi." They got a boat show in Abu Dhabi. Drive it to the yacht show in Abu Dhabi. But to do that, they've got to go through the Suez Canal, through the Red Sea, past Somalia. They read the newspapers and they see all these boats being taken over by Somali pirates, sometimes with fatal circumstances, fatal consequences. Right. "Do you guys guard yachts?" I said, "Yeah, we can definitely guard you from the pirates. We know how to do that." So fortunately, we had like 6 weeks lead time. We talked to some people who knew more about it than we did. Figured out a game plan. The toughest part is getting the weapon. You have to have weapons. So we had to make arrangements to be able to buy weapons in Egypt, which took some finagling, through the canal, through the Red Sea, and past Somalia, and around up to Abu Dhabi, and they sold the yacht, and we were big heroes. And that captain was so pleased with us, he spread the word, and we started getting more and more phone calls. Again, it's not the kind of thing that happens every week or every month or even every year, but we do offer that service.
You do a really very thorough background check too, right? Tell me all of that everything you can find out and how widespread your web can be.
Well, we call it a comprehensive background search. Usually ends up being about 30 or 40 pages. Some of it is open source, but the majority of it we get through these databases that we're able to subscribe to as licensed investigators. So people that think, well, I can just go online or go to backgroundsearch.net and do the same thing. It's not only is ours much more comprehensive, it's far more accurate, and it's also more current. You know, a lot of the stuff you find, I use this example a lot. If I type in, I've had my same cell phone number since 2001, so over 20 years. If I type my cell phone number into some of these online databases to see who it belongs to, it's Phil Goldstein or some name I'd never heard of, which means that information is more than 2 decades old.
Right.
So, some stuff, and obviously I have a biased opinion. People say, well, I can find that on the internet. You can find something on the internet, but is it going to be correct?
As far as my personal privacy, your personal privacy, how much in peril are we now as opposed to where we were 10 years ago or 5 years ago? It seems like your personal security can be breached pretty easily now.
Yes and no. You make a good point, but also consider how many privacy laws are in place involving the internet and other things, public data. When we were kids, we could have walked into a DMV and said, I want to know who this license plate number belongs to. You can make up a story. He was parked in front of my house. I scared my mom or something. And they'd say, yeah, okay, it belongs to this person. Now, if you ask that same question at the DMV, they would look at you like you had 2 heads because there are privacy laws in place that don't allow them to do that. So in some ways, we're being more protected privacy-wise. But you're right, in some ways, technology has made it easier to snoop.
Who's the ideal client?
A paranoid millionaire.
I mean, before we go, back to it was cloak and dagger to some degree, right? The CIA life. And Do you miss it?
I do miss it at times. I think I made the right decision leaving when I did, just in talking to people that are there now. It's not quite the same. I think the thing I liked best about it was the idea that I was doing something that not very many people are A, capable of doing, and B, willing to do.
What kind of personality is the person who does this best?
Someone who can think on their feet, someone who is able to push down the fear and allow themselves to go into situations that part of their brain is telling them is a bad idea. I think one thing that, getting away from the danger aspect for a second, one thing that I think most people find interesting or not aware of is that the job that I did, CIA officer, operative, or whatever you want to call them, you have to be a people person. That process we were talking about earlier, the recruitment process, if you're kind of a sullen loner and doesn't like people, you're probably not going to recruit very many people because you're not going to get close to them. You have to make them like you and trust you before you can ever recruit them. If I'm asking you to risk your life for me and you think I'm a jerk, you're not going to do it. They're looking for someone that can go to diplomatic reception and an hour and a half later, they've met 45 people. Yeah. They're around, they're shaking hands, they're buying people drinks, they're asking them about their kids. That's someone who succeeds in the CIA, not someone that stands in the corner, and hides behind the potted palm.
All right, man. Thank you very much. Millennium Group.
Millennium Group. MillenniumGroup2001.com.
Beautiful.
Is the website.
Brad Robinson, appreciate your interview. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys soon.
Studio 33480 is brought to you by the Palm Beach Civic Association and our sponsor, the Fortin Foundation of Florida. We welcome your thoughts on how our program can best serve our members and residents.